it was time to come home. Back in New Zealand, I wasted little time in reconnecting with the same old group of dodgy mates and falling back into drug abuse and criminality. Meanwhile, Mum's condition deteriorated. She lived longer than expected and died when I was 18. 3 days later, I found myself in a situation with which I was woefully ill-equipped to deal. The man from whom I had been buying drugs engineered an excuse to be alone with me in my flat, then made a forceful sexual advance on me when I was high on morphine. I had been sexually abused when I was 13 and had repressed rather than come to terms with that experience. All of the anger, pain, and confusion arising from that life event, the intensity of the grief I felt at my mother's death, a million other frustrations and disappointments, these all contributed to what happened next. I reacted violently, and by the time I had finished, I had beaten a man to death. There was a point where I had defended myself, but instead of then letting him leave, I chose to take actions that ended his life. I was arrested, charged, tried, and sentenced to life imprisonment. Over the next 11 years, I spent time in some of New Zealand's toughest prisons. For well over half of my sentence, I was far from a model prisoner. I spent my entire time doing drugs to avoid contemplating my situation and planning to escape so that I could resume the life of crime, drug-taking, and mayhem for which it seemed I was destined. For this reason, I was regularly in trouble and spent lots of time in solitary confinement. Nothing about my story to this point is that different to the stories of many of those with whom I was in prison and shared cells. Apart, perhaps, from the fact that my home life gave me less reason to be in prison. And I could so easily have shared the future of most of them too, the dismal cycle of release, recidivist offending, re-imprisonment. But through luck as much as through anything else, my path crossed those of some people who encouraged me to begin to look at my life and prospects in a different light. One of these men asked me to predict whether, if he dropped them from the same height, a heavier or a lighter object would hit the floor first. He held out a scrunched-up ball of paper in one hand and a tennis ball in the other. Well, any moron knew that the heavier object would fall faster, didn't they? He had to perform the experiment twice, and I had to perform it for myself to ensure there was no trick, before I could believe the evidence of my eyes, which flatly contradicted what I had believed. I had just been introduced to the Galilean principle of gravity. It is not the weight of the objects that determined how fast they fell, but rather the equally experienced gravitational pull of the Earth. And that was the start of it, really. If I could be so profoundly wrong about something of which I was so staunchly convinced, which other deep-rooted beliefs did I hold that were also wrong? Perhaps some of my beliefs about myself and my potential were wrong too. With the encouragement of several of the positive influences who were around me at the time, I enrolled in a university course. I wasn't thinking noble thoughts of rehabilitation or anything like that. My original plan was to do a legal executive course so that I could more effectively argue my own case in my many grievance and disciplinary hearings against the prison authorities. Nor did I have high expectations. I'd put little effort in at school and had failed to achieve. Many of my teachers had assured me I was useless, and that had reinforced my belief that there was no point in trying. It was what psychologists call a vicious cycle, or a negative feedback loop, and it's a common enough example of one too. But the first assignment I did for my extramural university course, ignorant, naive, and chaotic as it seems to me now, got a pass mark, and that was a revelation. That little dose of affirmation left me craving more, and I began to put more effort into my reading and thinking. More than that, I found myself actually enjoying reading and thinking in their own right. It was what's called a virtuous cycle, or a positive feedback loop. The more I enjoyed the work, the more effort I put in, and the better my marks became, which encouraged me to put more effort in.